All right. If I could ask everyone to stay in their seats, we're going to move towards a conclusion of this year's Arms Control Association annual meeting. But we have a few more things to say, a few more people to thank. And as my good friend and our board chair, Tom, was reminding me, this meeting would not be possible without you, our members, and our donors, including a small but loyal set of major philanthropies. And there are too many to name all right now, but they're all listed in the conference program, which is also available online for those of you watching online. I also want to particularly thank this year the Carnegie Endowment for National Peace, who have been very helpful with technical support and with this beautiful facility, which is where we have traditionally held our meeting. We took a little time away at the National Press Club, but we're back here, and we're very grateful to Carnegie. So thanks to them. And the Arms Control Association is, as you've heard, a relatively small but very active organization. We are an energetic group of people, and I wouldn't look so good in front of you if it wasn't for my fantastic team who, this is really a team effort. Every year it is. Every Arms Control Today issue is. I want to thank Kathy, who you just saw, who was the ringleader, as well as a number of people who you met at the registration table. And of course, our top-notch policy team, including Kelsey Davenport, you heard from before. I also want to thank the board of directors. You've heard about Tom, but there are other board members in the audience who have been here today. They are experts, they're advocates. They are providing their expertise and time and energy on volunteer basis, helping to guide ACA and help me provide answers to the difficult issues we're all dealing with these days. And before we stop thanking our board members, we wanted to take a few minutes out for a special recognition of one of our departing board members, someone who has been a special part of ACA's work for more than 20 years, who's been on the staff as a senior fellow, a board member, and that is Greg Thielmann, who is in the audience, all the way here from the great Midwest in Iowa. Greg has spent more than 3 decades in the executive and legislative branches of government, specializing in political, military, and intelligence issues. He was a Foreign Service officer for 25 years in some wonderful places like Brazil, some not so wonderful places like Moscow. He was a political military affairs officer in Germany. He was, to give you an idea of how far back and how important he was in certain roles, he was a special advisor to the assistant to the president and secretary of state on arms control matters, Paul Nitze, and was a State Department advisor on the U.S. delegation on the INF treaty negotiations. And then, very importantly, my favorite part of Greg's career was his role as director of the Strategic Proliferation and Military Affairs Office in the Department of State's Bureau of Intelligence and Research up until 2003. So for those of you who know your history, your WMD history, you will know that Greg was there when the INR team developed the assessment about Iraq's WMD that was not so flawed. It turned out to be quite right. But it was that part of the intelligence community's products that was overlooked by the good people in the Bush administration. And Greg was principled enough at the time to find a way to leave Foggy Bottom and principled enough to speak up about the flaws in the administration's interpretation of the WMD intelligence. And Greg was at the center of the most popular ACA press conference in our 50-year history, which was in July 2003. If you recall, this is just a few months after the invasion. It was at the National Press Club. We had more cameras than I can remember. And at that press conference, Greg summarized the situation very well. He said, quote, "The principal reason that Americans did not understand the nature of the Iraqi threat, in my view, was the failure of senior administration officials to speak honestly about what the intelligence showed." He said the Bush administration has had a faith-based intelligence attitude, its top-down use of intelligence. We know the answers. Give us the intelligence to support those answers. So that applied very well then, and unfortunately, those words are still important today. So after that event, Greg got quite a bit of attention from the press. It led to a 60 minutes segment, 60 Minutes 2 segment, later that year called The Man Who Knew. And Greg was the center of this Scott Pelley reported episode, which won an Emmy Award for Scott Pelley. And so maybe Scott Pelley should give you some sort of award too. I don't know. But look, more importantly, Greg's analysis provided a reality check on our nation's understanding of the pre-war intelligence then, and also how we look at government intel assessments to this day. So from there, Greg went on to serve on the board of the Arms Control Association from 2003 to 2005, and then he went back into government on the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence as a professional staff person. And then somehow in 2009, and I can't remember, Greg, maybe we can talk about this later, I somehow persuaded you to join the ACA staff as a senior fellow. And in that role, he provided us with excellent analysis on the threat assessments and the threats that we were facing during that period on nuclear, chem bio, missile proliferation, U.S. strategic arms control, and was a treasured colleague on the staff of at ACA. And it was a tremendous pleasure to be working with him through those years and since then. And he rejoined the board afterwards and just this year cycled off. So Kelsey, if you could join me for a moment. So in addition to those professional accomplishments, Greg was much more than that and provided a lot of help to the ACA staff, and Kelsey's going to talk about that.
Okay, so it is now my great privilege to try to go a little bit beyond the bio and give you a sense of what Greg has meant to ACA and the broader nuclear community. And I'm going to be really honest, 14 years at ACA, and this is probably the hardest thing I've ever had to write because I know very well I probably wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Greg. But as Daryl said, Greg is very widely known as the man who knew. But to those of us that worked at ACA, Greg was so much more. Greg might more appropriately be called the man who always had a joke, a story, or an obscure piece of trivia fit for every situation. Only from Greg could you get the history of the INF treaty negotiations, a North Korea missile joke, a reflection on the Bible, a story about losing the president's passport, and an obscure fact about Iowa. And you could get this all before lunch. I could also call Greg the man who could work an astounding array of literary references into his analysis. And looking back at one, I realized that really only Greg could reference Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Shakespeare, Mark Twain, and Iran's missile program in a way that all made sense. We could also say that Greg is the man who is single-handedly trying to make sure that everybody uses the terms preventive and preemptive war correctly. And perhaps one of my favorites, Greg is one of the few people who knew exactly what kind of glasses you need to see the Iranian ICBM that would be built with sufficient foreign assistance by 2015. As Greg predicted, 10 years later, we're still waiting to see it. But most importantly, if I had to say one thing about Greg, it is that Greg should be better known as the man who cared. And this is where I'm going to see if my mascara is actually waterproof. Greg, in your time at ACA, you taught us the importance of investing in relationships and the importance of creating community. Because even when the issues were urgent and when it felt like the world was on fire, you never lost sight of the people. The days were always better at ACA when roof landed in our inbox, because that was Greg's signal that we should all gather for lunch upstairs. And at a time when a lot of senior experts talked about fostering the next generation of experts, Greg is one of the few who actually did the work to do it. Greg was, and still is, unstintingly generous in his knowledge, always taking the time to teach and to explain. But more importantly, Greg cared enough about our careers to give us honest feedback. It's always good to hear what you're doing right, but the more critical conversations, the moments that I think truly help us grow, come when someone tells us how we can improve and actually helps us do that. Thanks to you, Greg, we learned to write with greater precision, to realize the importance of every word, and we learned that our perspectives mattered because you took them seriously, because you created opportunities, even for interns, for younger staffers, to write, to attend events, to speak up, and to learn. But just as importantly, and just as important as the teaching, Greg always took the time to listen. No matter how crazy the idea, and I can tell you, I sat in Greg's office and shot off some doozies of ideas, Greg never laughed and he never shot it down. He was a safe sounding board, and a space for venting. You could tell Greg anything. I have probably told Greg everything without any fear of judgment, because you always knew he would try to understand and he would try to help. Greg, your thoughtfulness, your mentorship, your feedback, it really was a true gift. So if I had to sum it up, I would say, Greg, your insights and your wisdom made us better analysts and a more informed community. But more importantly, it was your integrity, your humanity, your humor, and your care that made us better people. You may have formally left ACA, but I know that you will never truly be gone, and we will never forget the impact you have had on this organization. So, because this was a surprise, we're not going to put you on the spot to speak, but I hope you will all join me in thanking Greg for his many years of service to ACA.
All right. And we will have, Greg, we will bring you your Lifetime Achievement Award, the man who knew, the first and only that has been developed. Greg needs a quick word. All right. Because.
First of all, this aw shucks moment was a complete surprise. And I didn't know that Daryl and Kelsey would be so good at keeping secrets. But the one thing I just wanted to add was, after this 60 Minutes program that used this funny title of The Man Who Knew, Undersecretary of State John Bolton, who I had reported to, was asked about it. And he assured the listeners that Thielmann knew nothing. So I just want to make sure that you've heard that.
All right, well, later we'll talk about, maybe we'll hear some John Bolton stories from Greg off the record. All right, listen, thank you, everyone. It has been a long afternoon talking about some very heavy subjects. Again, we thank everybody for their dedication, their support, their time. We encourage everybody to persevere. And as Tom mentioned at the beginning, our organization is a relatively small one, and our team is relatively small, and we do all this work with a total annual budget of only about $1.5 million. And it depends on all of you and many people outside this room who contribute, and we really appreciate that, and we look forward to working with you again in the future. This meeting has been recorded online, and we're going to be putting that on our website, armscontrol.org. Thank you, have a good night, be safe, and we are adjourned.